Number 1. Gail Delano. 33-year-old Gail Delano was a single mother of 2 teenage boys who lived in Wiscasset, Maine, and sought companionship through newspaper personal ads. On June 21, 1986, she went to meet a date at a local Howard Johnson's restaurant, and suddenly vanished. Her friends and family wonder if she met with foul play or engineered her own disappearance. The day before she vanished, her sons overheard her having a 2-hour phone conversation with a man named John who they assumed she met through the personal ads. The next morning, she told her sons that she would meet the man at the Howard Johnson's restaurant later that day in Brunswick, and hopefully spend the afternoon with him. When Gail's son Ryan returned home that evening, he discovered that his mother was not home. The next day, when she was still not home, her family called the police. Gail's car was found abandoned at the restaurant, and at first, authorities did not suspect foul play. Gail would sometimes spend the night with friends or dates, so it was assumed that she would eventually come home. However, her family was convinced that she had met with foul play. When Gail's car was searched, nothing was found of interest. 2 hours later, a busboy at the restaurant found a set of keys where Gail's car was parked. 2 weeks after that, a 9-year-old boy found Gail's purse in the bushes of the restaurant. Although the purse appeared to be untouched, there was no money in it, which was odd because Gail had always kept $50 in her wallet. After this discovery, police began to suspect foul play. Based on her date book, detectives questioned men whom Gail had dated in the past year. All of the men had alibis for the time of her disappearance, including a man named John. This man is not believed to be the man Gail was going on a date with. Despite keeping records of all of the men whom had called her, Gail for unknown reasons had not recorded or date John's full name or personal information. A new theory emerged when police interviewed a radio DJ named Kristen Roy who said that Gail had called the station multiple times prior to her disappearance, and he felt that she was suffering from depression. Authorities suspected that Gail may have disappeared and committed suicide elsewhere. Her family considered the possibility, but did not believe that she would do that to her family. Gail's family began circulating missing person flyers with truckers. 1 year after Gail vanished, a trucker named John Scott recognized her photograph as a woman whom he had given a ride to several months earlier. The trucker did notice some pill bottles but did not know what was contained in them. He was certain that the woman he had given the ride to was Gail, especially because of her northern accent. This led authorities believe that Gail may have engineered her own disappearance for unknown reasons. However, her family and friends are uncertain if she would have been able to disappear successfully and remain hidden for so many years. Her mother believes that she may be suffering from amnesia, wandering around aimlessly without knowing her identity. The authorities, her family, and her friends just want to know what happened to her and want to make sure that she is okay. The man named John whom Gail was supposed to go on a date with is considered a possible suspect, but he remains unidentified. Sadly, Gail was found to have committed suicide in a Mobile, Alabama hotel while registered under the false name of Jackie Stafford within a few days after disappearing. After the broadcast, a forensic administrator who had been watching noticed the similarities to a woman found in the hotel 2 years earlier and called the telecenter. Forensic tests confirmed her identity and her family held a memorial service for her in Brunswick, Maine, on November 11, 1988. She was buried in Mobile, Alabama. Number 2. Monika Rizzo. Monika Rizzo, 44, was last seen alive on May 5, 1997, when she left the government office where she worked at in San Antonio, Texas without explanation. She left behind her purse but did not return. After 8 days of unanswered phone calls, her boss finally reached her at home. She said that she was not feeling well and would be out the rest of the week. She said she would return to work the following Monday, May 19. However, she never returned to work. Her husband Leonard claimed that a few days later, he woke up and she was gone. He never reported her disappearance to the police. On June 5, the San Antonio police received an anonymous call from a man who claimed that she had been murdered by Leonard and that her bones were in her backyard. Investigators arrived at the home about 30 minutes later, only to find Leonard having an apparent seizure. As Leonard was being taken to the hospital, police questioned his son. He said that he lived across town and had not seen his mother in over a week. Her clothes were still in the closet and her car was still parked in the driveway. In the backyard, investigators found only animal bones. On July 5, 1997, The anonymous tipster called the police again, stating that Monika had been buried in the backyard. This time, he specifically stated that the remains were under a pile of tires in the yard. The police found a skull, several bone fragments, and a bag containing human flesh. Leonard had no explanation for the bones or his wife's disappearance. He claimed that someone was framing him. However, evidence inside the Rizzo home disputed his claim. Police found potential evidence of a violent struggle, several sections of bashed or blood-spattered drywall. Leonard claimed that he was emotional about his wife's disappearance and beat up the house. Investigators discovered that Monika's co-workers had noticed prior to her disappearance that she had been losing weight and had bruises on her arms. In fact, they were so concerned about her, that they had contacted the police, asking to check on her. When an officer met with her, he noticed that she had bruises on her face. However, she claimed that she was fine and that she had just fell. Leonard claimed that he was not abusive. Police brought in a team of archaeologists from the University of Texas to excavate the backyard. Anytime they found a bone fragment or other type of evidence, they put down an orange pin flag. By the time they were done, the entire yard was covered with the flags. The archaeologists believed that the bones had been there for a few weeks. Bones were found in all parts of the yard, including the barbecue grill. Over 8 days, more than 200 bone fragments were collected. Most of them had been chopped into pieces less than 3 inches long. A wood chipper or shredder was believed to have been used. Leonard claimed that he had never operated a wood chipper. Surprisingly, investigators announced that they believed that the remains in the backyard belonged to 4 people. Even more surprising was that none of the remains belonged to Monika. Her husband Leonard had no explanation for the bones. Nobody knows what happened to Monika or whose bones were in the backyard, although some believe that Leonard was involved in his wife's disappearance. An anonymous call advises police to search the backyard of Leonard and Monika Rizzo for Monika's bones. Monika disappeared a few weeks prior to the call, having last been seen by someone other than her husband when she was leaving work. He claims she returned to their home and later left. He neglected to report her missing. The police search of the yard discovered bones, but they were determined to be that of an animal. The police just assumed it was a false lead. Tip: 5 weeks pass and another anonymous call is placed to the police, instructing them to search under a pile of tires in the yard that they definitely missed something the first time. The police return, and along with what appear to be human bones, they discover a bag of flesh. First the bones were tested and determined to not match Monika, then it was concluded that they were the remains of 4 separate persons, all before finally being concluded to be Monika's bones all along. See roller coaster. Leonard was later convicted of assault with a deadly weapon and kidnapping in an incident since 1997. To me, it is abundantly clear that Leonard is hiding his part in what happened to Monika. And honestly, the biggest mystery here is why the police never had enough evidence against Leonard. Kinda maddening, especially watching Leonard on the Unsolved Mysteries coverage of this case. Number 3. Sammy Wheeler. On June 7, 1992, 36-year-old Sammy Wheeler was found brutally murdered in his car, shot 6 times, and apparently robbed while parked at the George Washington National Forest in Virginia. The killer had gone to great lengths to clean the crime scene. All shell casings and fingerprints were removed, and the killer had tried unsuccessfully to ignite the vehicle. Investigators believe that he was killed at around 1 a.m. They learned that he had gone to the forest and planned to go fishing on the day he was killed. After discovering that Sammy's wallet was missing, the FBI assumed that his murder was a random act of violence. However, 3 suspects soon emerged that suggested that he may have known his killer. Sammy's girlfriend, Pat Sneed, her ex-husband, Bob Bean, and Sammy's twin brother, Danny, have all been considered suspects, each of them placing the blame on the other. The story began in the fall of 1991, when Pat moved into a rental unit owned by Danny. The property was divided into 2 apartments. Pat lived in one with Sammy and her 2 sons, while Danny lived in the other. The arrangement worked well for everyone except for Bob. He asked Pat to live separately from Sammy, but she did not want to. In February 1992, a court order required that Sammy would not allow to be around Pat if she was with her sons. In order for this situation to work, he moved into Danny's apartment. Bob was still suspicious, so he hired a private investigator to ensure that the court order was obeyed. The private investigator claimed that Sammy violated it, but Danny said that this was not true. Sammy decided that he would sleep in his truck in order to show that he was not doing so. Bob claims that he and Sammy were cordial to one another, but Danny says that this is not true. He believes that Bob hated Sammy and that he is a liar. Pat agreed with Danny, stating that Sammy did not trust Bob. On June 3, 1992, at around 5:30 a.m., Sammy left Danny's apartment and found Bob's son, from a previous marriage, taking pictures of him. Sammy confronted Bob's son and told him that he was not violating the court order. Danny believes that Bob hired a hitman to kill Sammy because he was unhappy about losing Pat and that he was living with her. Danny claims that Sammy and Pat were going to get married the week after his death. However, Bob claims that he was not upset that they were going to do so. He also appeared to have the perfect alibi. He was on maneuvers with his Army National Guard unit on the night of Sammy's murder. The camp he was at was 150 miles away. It would have been physically impossible for him to have committed the crime. He also claimed that he did not have the money to hire a hitman to kill Danny. After Bob was cleared of any involvement by the police, he claimed that Pat was the real killer, saying, first of all, that she does not have a concrete alibi for the time of Sammy's murder. He first suspected that she was the killer when their two sons told him that they went to the forest the day that Sammy was killed. They allegedly said specific details about the crime that he does not believe they would have learned secondhand. He even videotaped them talking about what they knew. He then presented the tape to the police. Danny believes that Bob coached his sons into making false statements about their mother. Authorities seemed to agree, as they dismissed the testimony as unreliable. They also believe that Pat also had an airtight alibi. She claimed to have been at home with the boys at the time of Sammy's murder. She was also eventually eliminated as a suspect. After Pat was cleared, Bob once again told police of a possible suspect. This time, it was Danny. Bob believes that Danny may have killed Sammy because he was in love with Pat. At first, she assumed that Bob was responsible, but she now also suspects that Danny was involved. After Sammy's death, Danny told one of her friends that he was in love with her. He, however, claims that he is not attracted to her. On the morning of Sammy's murder, his father and a police sergeant broke the news to Danny and Pat. He apparently began yelling and saying that Bob was the killer. He then grabbed his shotgun and ran for Bob's house. His father was able to calm him down. Pat believes that his hysterical reaction was a clever ploy to hide the fact that he was the killer. Once again, however, the authorities were able to confirm that he also had an alibi for the night of Sammy's murder. Several witnesses saw him bar hopping into the early morning hours of June 7, 1992. Based on the evidence, the FBI have ruled out Bob, Pat, and Danny in the case. However, they still believe that they each should be considered a suspect. Also, the local authorities suspect that Sammy may have known his killer. With the investigation stalled, Sammy's family hired private investigator Alan Cates in March of 1998. Within a few months, he located a witness who was with 29-year-old Guy Jackson Price on the morning of June 7, 1992. The witness claimed that he was with Price when he robbed and killed Sammy. As the FBI originally suspected, the murder was indeed a random act of violence. On July 24, 1998, Price was arrested and charged with murder. He was later convicted and is now serving a life sentence. He became eligible for parole in 2012 but was denied. Number 4. Kevin Hughes. 23-year-old Kevin Hughes was a chart director for Cashbox magazine in Nashville, Tennessee. He was in charge of compiling the independent country chart. As chart director, he received playlist reports from different radio stations throughout the country. Based on these reports, he ranked records from 1 to 100 according to their popularity. A high position on these charts could be a great help for an aspiring musician or music group. According to his boss and co-workers, he was a hard worker and did his job well. Sometimes, he would stay up until 10 p.m. working on the charts. On the night of Thursday, March 9, 1989, Kevin was finishing work on the newest charts when his friend, aspiring singer and songwriter Sammy SADLER, stopped by. At approximately 8:30 p.m., they left the office to go to a nearby restaurant for dinner. After dinner, they made an unplanned stop at Sammy's work, Evergreen Records, so he could use the phone. While there, Sammy heard the sound of someone trying to open the door. Kevin looked outside and saw a man walking away from the area. He thought the man was black, but he was not sure. A few minutes later, the two left Evergreen Records, They looked for the unknown man but did not see him. They then walked to Kevin's car. As Sammy entered Kevin's car from the passenger side, an unknown gunman came up and shot him. Kevin tried to flee the scene, but he was tragically shot and killed on the street. Sammy, however, survived the shooting, despite a bullet severing a major artery in his arm. Despite having 5 witnesses to the shooting, nobody could give a good description of the assailant. After his murder, there was speculation that he had been killed in a dispute connected to his work, possibly in a professional hit. However, investigators could not find evidence to support any theory. They felt that a professional hit was unlikely, since the killer shot, but did not kill, Sammy and left several witnesses behind. Investigators are still trying to determine who killed Kevin Hughes. In 2002, Richard D'Antonio, a disgruntled former employee of Cashbox, was arrested and charged with Kevin's murder. Investigators determined that Kevin had found out that D'Antonio had been accepting money to place artists on the Cashbox music chart list. He had also learned that Chuck Dixon, a record promoter at Cashbox, was behind the scheme. Authorities believe that Dixon had D'Antonio kill Kevin in order to keep him quiet. In fact, a witness stated that Dixon said Kevin would be handled or gone and that he would not be able to reveal the truth about the scheme. However, Dixon died in 2001, before he could be charged in the case. Along with the Cashbox scheme, other evidence connected D'Antonio to the murder. He matched the description given by witnesses of the shooter. One witness noticed that he walked with an unusual side-to-side gait, which was similar to how D'Antonio walked at the time due to a back problem. Black cat hair found in the hat left at the scene was similar to a cat that D'Antonio owned at the time. Also, a witness told police that he had sold a .38 pistol to D'Antonio shortly before the murder. This type of gun was used in the murder. The witness gave D'Antonio ammunition which was the same type that was used to kill Kevin. The witness also told police that on the day of the murder, D'Antonio had test-fired the weapon into the witness's backyard. Investigators recovered bullets from his backyard. One was determined to have been fired from the same gun that killed Kevin. The witness, along with D'Antonio's wife, were told by D'Antonio to lie about his whereabouts in order to create him an alibi. Investigators did not believe he could have been the shooter until the witnesses came forward and told the truth. In September 2003, D'Antonio was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. He would not be eligible for parole until 2036. However, he died in prison in September 2014. Number 5. Brook Baker. 19-year-old Brook Baker was a journalism major and sophomore at Vincennes University in Indiana who was found on her bed brutally raped and stabbed in her off-campus apartment on September 7, 1997, with water oddly running from the bathtub faucet. As investigators began looking into the case, they discovered 3 possible theories as to who would kill her. The first theory involved her involvement in journalism at the university. In spring 1997, she was investigating an alleged date rape that occurred at a local fraternity. However, its members disliked her investigation and threatened her verbally and with emails. She was unfazed, but her mother was concerned about her safety. A few weeks before she was killed, Brook was at a friend's house when a truck filled with frat brothers arrived and threatened her. In order to feel safer, she moved to a new apartment off campus in which the landlord was a campus police officer. The second theory was that the landlord was responsible. Brook told her friends and family that he would come into the apartment unannounced at various times. One night, while she was sleeping, he shined a light inside. On another night, he came in while she was taking a shower. Investigators believed that he may have let himself in on the night of the murder. They had a confrontation, and she was killed as a result. A third possible theory involving her death was that a person posing as a potential roommate killed her. Just days before she was killed, she had placed an ad in the campus newspaper for a roommate for her apartment. Investigators believe that her killer may have read it, went to her apartment, claiming to be answering it, then came in and murdered her. This is supported by the fact that there was no evidence of forced entry in the apartment. Meanwhile, investigators began looking into the physical evidence they had in the case, and tested DNA samples found on her with more than 50 suspects, but none of them matched. More recently, investigators have been looking to question her cousin about the case. She had been staying with her, but moved to California 1 week before the murder. She has reportedly been unwilling to answer any questions from investigators. It is unknown what information she may have on the case. Brook's parents, along with other family members and friends, are hoping for answers in this case. On July 5, 1999, investigators searched the apartment of missing Vincennes College student Erica Elaine Norman, and were shocked to discover a nearly identical crime scene to Brook's, including the water running from the bathtub faucet. However, Erica's body was not found in her apartment. A man named Brian Jones was soon brought in for questioning after investigators learned that she was last seen alive with him. Investigators learned after interviewing him that he was a roommate of a man who was dating Brook before her death. He gave police a DNA sample and it was found to have conclusively matched the DNA found on her body. He was then arrested and charged with her murder. When Erica's body was found 2 weeks later, he pleaded guilty to her murder, and in exchange the death penalty could not be used at Brook's trial. On December 14, 2000, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murders of Brook and Erica. Sadly, Brook Baker's mother, Janet, passed away in 2004. Number 6. Kari Lynn Nixon. On the night of June 22, 1987, 16-year-old Kari Lynn Nixon left her home to run an errand for her dad at around 9:30 p.m. She bought some groceries at a nearby store, and left at around 9:55 p.m. She exchanged greetings with a neighbor at around 10:05 p.m. 5 minutes later, a group of teenagers walked down the street, but Kari was not there. Somehow, she disappeared within just 700 feet of her home. The next day, a massive search began for Kari. However, no trace of her was found. Authorities, her family, and friends were torn on what they believed happened to her. Some believe that she was abducted by a stranger, while others believe that she ran away. She was close to her family, did not have any problems with her home life, nor did she take any extra money or belongings with her, suggesting she was abducted. However, she had also made some interesting comments to a friend, claiming that she wanted to leave the area, possibly going to California or Florida. In November 1987, the New York State Police received a letter from Flint, Michigan, claiming that she was in the Eutahlville, South Carolina area. Her family went to the area and put up several missing person posters. Soon, Shirley Canipple, Eutahlville resident, came forward, claiming that she encountered Kari during the summer of 1987. Under hypnosis, she remembered being introduced to a girl who had called herself Kari Nixon, who claimed that she was from New York. She said that Kari had 2 earrings and long, brown hair. She apparently seemed shy and unwilling to talk to Shirley. Authorities located the girl that Shirley claims was with Kari the day she met her, but she had a memory lapse and was unable to recall the events. Investigators have looked into over 70 sightings of Kari, but are uncertain if she is still alive. On June 5, 1989, the New Kids on the Block filmed a music video at one of their concerts in Los Angeles, California. In March 1991, Kari's parents viewed it and noticed a girl in the audience that looked just like her. Investigators believed that they were most likely the same person. A detailed analysis of the video showed that the girl had almost identical hair length, hair color, face shape, and number of earrings in her right ear as Kari did before she vanished. COT members Jordan and Jonathan Knight made personal appeals for Kari to come forward. However, the young girl in the video would later come forward and identify herself. She was a teenager from Washington, D.C. Then, on January 28, 1994, almost 7 years after Kari vanished, her body was unearthed in a shallow grave only miles from her home. Robert Anthony Jones confessed to her kidnapping, rape, and murder. He had been arrested for numerous bank robberies. He had confessed to her murder in an effort to get his wife, Teresa, a lighter sentence for driving the getaway car from a local bank heist with their 2 children inside. He had kidnapped Kari at gunpoint and drove her to his parents' camp, where he raped, strangled, and shot her. He buried her on the remote J property the following morning. At the time, he was 23 years old and living in Bar Harbor, Maine with his family. He had returned to his hometown for a week-long visit when he abducted Kari, whom he had spotted while he was buying beer at the local store. He later returned to the Osable Forks area where he settled with his family, only 200 yards from where he had buried her. Under the negotiated plea, he secured an 18-year to life sentence for the robberies and her murder. He is now an inmate in Sing Sing prison and his first parole board hearing was in 2011. He was denied parole that September and, as of 2016, remains in prison. He has stated that he abducted her because of marital difficulties, claiming Teresa had cheated on him as well as claiming he had committed robbery in order to intentionally get caught. Recently the Newsdick's parole board denied Jones his first attempt for release. On December 3, 2007, Nixon's brother, Jonathan Edward Nixon, died after a year-long battle with ALS. He was survived by a daughter also named Kari Lynn Nixon in her aunt's honor. Number 7. Michael Henley. 9-year-old Michael Paul Henley Jr. had gone on a camping trip with his father and a family friend on April 21, 1988, in the Zuni Mountains. Just 20 minutes after they arrived, Michael mysteriously vanished. A search of the area found no trace of him. Then, on June 15, 1989, a woman in Port St., Florida, noticed a white van next to her car as she went to a store. When she returned, a photograph laid where the van was, which depicted a young boy and girl bound and gagged. The Henley family believed the boy in the photograph was Michael Henley, and the family of a missing 19-year-old girl named Tara Calico recognized the girl as her. The FBI has not been able to determine if the two children in the picture are Tara and Michael. In 1990, the remains of Michael Henley were found just a few miles from the campsite that he had vanished from. Michael had the misfortune of getting lost in the forest and having his head and limbs torn off by a wild animal suspected to be a bear. His disappearance and death is no longer believed to be related to the disappearance of Tara Calico. She, however, remains missing. Also, the boy in the photograph has never been identified.